Hi, this is Ned Siegfried from Siegfried & Jensen. As proud sponsors of BeliefCast, we hope you are inspired by Todd's weekly podcasts, which contain so many courageous stories of recovery and personal growth. Remember, it's not what happened in the past that matters, it's what happens in the future. We invite you all to work hard and be optimistic about your future. Enjoy today's podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Inspires BeliefCast. Thank you for tuning in once again. You guys are fantastic. I love you guys. The support has been overwhelmingly positive and great. You guys share these episodes, and it's been so fun. I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Wasatch Recovery, Siegfried & Jensen, iHeal Institute, Veracity Networks, and Living Recoveries Interventions. You guys, thank you for believing in me and trusting me. And actually, because of you, we're able to get this to many more people. So thank you so much. And like I said, thanks for tuning in week after week. This has been fantastic. Today, we are joined by Ashely Garbe Smith. Ashely, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, I'm so grateful. So Ashely and I have some mutual friends, Tiffany Peterson, Christy Jex. You know, she rubs shoulders with these powerful women, and she's one as well. And I want to give you a little background on Ashely. She graduated from the Reuben Clark Law School at Brigham Young University. She also founded her own law firm, AGS Law, because you wanted to focus on helping clients protect their businesses, assets, families, and that kind of thing. Ashely is also a professional musician who has toured nationally with several bands as a keyboardist and a singer. And by the way, we were just talking about this. I've listened to some of her music, and it's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Like, honestly, it's really, really good. You wrote and produced your own album back in 2012, and you continue to perform. You're also a speaker, and you're on podcasts all the time. You're a radio guest. You do speaking on various topics. One of them, which we're going to talk a lot about today probably, is turning tragedy into triumph. Mm-hmm. And you also are very passionate about empowering women.
Yes.
Right? And you're one yourself, by the way. I'm very impressed on the way you carry yourself.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's really what attracted to me to having you on the show. I thought, man, I love the way she carries herself. I know that what we see sometimes isn't always the case, mm-hmm. but again, you own your own business. You've been through tragedy. You turned it into triumph. These are the kind of people that I love having on the show. So thank you for doing this.
Well, thanks for having me. I've actually been a fan of the show for a while.
Oh, that's awesome. So cool. Well, why don't we start? Why don't you tell our listeners, where did you grow up and a little bit about your family?
Okay, so I grew up in a very small town, Salem, Utah.
Oh, yeah.
At the time that I was growing up there, I think we had about 5,000 to 8,000 people living in Salem. It's grown a little bit since then, but it was a small town, and I really liked living in a small town as a kid, but as a teenager, I really just kind of wanted to bust out of there. And I grew up around. My mom was a really powerful, amazing woman, and she worked the whole time that I was growing up, but she was probably the only mom that I knew that actually had a job and worked. And she had to because my parents were divorced.
Oh, okay.
And so but she didn't ever go to college. She barely graduated high school. She also grew up in Salem.
Okay.
And so, we were generations of people growing up in this small town. And so she always told me, I want so much more for you. Even though she didn't go to college, she ended up, she started as a secretary at a steel company.
Oh, wow.
And she just made her way up the ranks and ultimately became the credit manager for this steel company. And so she would go and knock on these doors of these business owners. And at the time, they're construction business owners. And she'd knock on their door. She would go and travel there and say, hey, you owe us money, and I'm not going to leave until you pay us. Yeah, she was so amazing and so powerful. And so I learned a lot from her. But the funny thing is because she didn't know anything about going to college, that was never really pushed. Yeah. And so in my mind, I was just going to be a rock star. And that's what I was going to do with my life. I was going to be a famous musician, a rock star.
Why not, right?
Yeah. I mean, because it's got to be easy to do. Yeah. So I didn't ever really have plans to go to college.
Wow. So if you don't mind me asking, how old were you when your parents divorced?
So I was 16 when they divorced.
Okay, when they actually divorced. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm sure that was a difficult time. And obviously it is for any kid, and no matter what age. But, some of the things that you said about your mom that really stand out to me, it seems like that older generation, they knew the value of hard work.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, here she is going place to place. Hey, you owe us money.
Yeah.
And I'm not leaving.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
who does that?
I know.
Right.
She was amazing. And she was such a good mom. She was such a present mom. And yet she still had this amazing job that she was able to support her family with.
Right. So did you have other siblings growing up as well?
I did. So I was the oldest of 3.
Okay.
And I have a younger sister and a younger brother.
Oh, right on. How did you like being the oldest?
I am a typical oldest child. Very bossy, know-it-all, insufferable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty typical for the oldest, that kind of thing. And I always ask that question because it's interesting. You hear people say, well, I didn't like being the youngest, or I didn't like the pressure of being the oldest because you're supposed to be the example, right? And
right.
that kind of thing. And so if I could ask, what were some of maybe the biggest lessons you've learned? You've talked a little bit about it, but from your mom, like what did you learn, just from your mom watching her do what she did?
My mom and I are such great friends. And one of the biggest lessons I learned from her is she was judged a lot because she was a working mom in a community where there weren't a lot of working moms. She was the first person to get divorced in our neighborhood.
Right.
And so there was a lot of judgment, I think, that was passed.
Sure.
But my mom never judged or gossiped about anybody. And I mean, she just didn't.
Yeah.
And she just lived her life, and she was accepting of everyone. And she taught us not to judge and not to gossip about people, because I think that she had experienced that so much that it was so important for her to teach us not to judge or gossip about people. So as successful as she was, really, I think the biggest lesson was just the person that she was, and the kind and just truly loving person that she was.
No, that's
and
amazing. And I think we take that for granted on how important it is the way we carry ourselves. I talked about. That's why I was, I wanted you on the show, because I love the way you carry yourself, and I think we take for granted the power of kindness and compassion and not judging,
right?
That kind of thing. Because when you go through it, like growing up, you probably heard a lot of things like, "Oh, she's divorced and she's working, or she shouldn't be working. She should be home with the kids," or whatever that was at the time. Again, it's amazing through some of those difficult times you learn some of the greatest lessons, right?
Yeah.
So, what kind of child were you? I mean, because again, you're a very confident person. You're a go-getter, you're hardworking, but were you always like that growing up? How were you growing up?
I was, but you learn pretty quickly. And I would say probably, in the older elementary age to junior high, you learn that other people don't necessarily like that when you, when you're confident and you're a go-getter. And so I was bullied, and
Really?
I was bullied pretty badly.
Oh, wow.
And so, even though I was confident, I think from about 5th to 7th grade, I had some bullies. I had some pretty significant bullying experiences that really diminished that confidence. Okay. And it taught me to, I need to put myself in a box.
Right.
And a lot of it stemmed from, I would try out for talent shows and try out for the school play. And for whatever reason, other girls didn't like that. Now that I'm older, I understand where that comes from, and I can process that. But at that age, that's a really hard thing to deal with when you're just trying to be accepted.
Absolutely.
And so I would say probably around 7th grade, that confidence really diminished, and I started purposefully not doing well in school. Sloughing school, not getting good grades, hanging out with kids I probably shouldn't have been hanging out with. Yeah. And the funny thing is, Christy Jex was a guest on your podcast.
Yes.
In 8th grade, cute little Christy Cook was her name at the time. She came up and she became friends with me, and she would hold my hand when she would talk to me, and I thought that was so weird. I'm like, why? I can picture that. Hey, why is this girl holding my hand? And she would come up and give me a hug, and I wasn't a very touchy-feely person. My family just wasn't really like that, but she definitely was. But thank goodness for Christy, and she's turned into this amazing woman.
Oh yeah.
But because Christy being my friend and teaching me, hey, you can have these female friendships that, are physical and close. And having Christy as a friend really actually kind of changed my trajectory as a teenager. It really did.
It's interesting how influential friends can be.
Yeah.
Good or bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about Christy even off the air, but she's a very confident person, go-getter.
Right.
She's very, energetic and
She
vibrant,
is,
right?
yes.
And it sounds like that's how she was, but even back then.
Oh, back then, yeah. I'm like, why is this girl coming up and holding my hand? This is really weird.
Yeah. So, you mentioned your parents were divorced at 16. How did you handle that? Being the oldest sibling as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's almost like, you're almost taking on a role almost on a parental side of things because you're probably helping out a lot with the younger siblings. Would you mind talking about that? Or?
Yeah. And, I actually ended up, I didn't have a great relationship with my dad. And I can say that now because we have worked on our relationship since then.
Yeah.
But my dad and I went several years without even speaking. And, I think he had some things that he had to deal with and process. And because I was a teenager, and I saw my mom go through what she was going through because she had primary custody of us.
Right.
I blamed my dad for a lot of things, and I didn't speak to him for several years. And that actually really did affect my relationships as I got a little bit older.
Right.
And so I've been able to process that and work through it at the time, but it was really tough.
Yeah. Well, and again, kids who go through that at that age, I mean, there's some level they've done studies where psychologically they think that it's somehow their fault on some level.
Yeah.
And maybe you felt a little bit of that at the time as well. And again.
Yeah. I think for me, I never felt like it was my fault. I could see that my dad had some things that he needed to work through. I had some things that I needed to work through. And we just kind of didn't meet up until I was in my early 20s.
Till later, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you guys are working things out and you guys are talking. And
we have a great relationship
that's
now.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. Again, tough times sometimes bring out the greatest things, right? Mm-hmm. So, you go through high school, you graduate high school. What were your plans after that? Like, you wanted to be a rock star?
I wanted to be a rock star, so I joined a couple bands.
Okay.
And I met a boy named Wyatt in one of those bands. He had blue hair. My mom was horrified that I was...
That's the guy with blue hair, right?
Yeah. And so he was the lead singer of the band. Blue hair. He wore a dog collar. That was the time. That was at a time where that was cool. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Maybe I just thought it was.
Hey, if you're in a band, I think it's cool.
Yeah. So
right?
I joined a couple bands. I didn't really have any plans to really get a college degree. I just really wanted to be a musician. And at that time, this is in the early 2000s, the goal was to get a record deal. And so I would shop demos and music out to different publishers, and we would go and we would play gigs, locally in Salt Lake and Provo. And I ended up falling in love with the lead singer of this band. His name was Wyatt, blue hair. And we ended up getting married. I got married very young. I got married at 20.
20, that is young, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To the boy with blue hair and a dog collar.
And your mom's probably going, what are you doing?
Yes, but she got to know him. And she's like, okay, I can look past. The blue hair eventually faded.
Okay, good.
And it turned into just bleached blonde hair.
Right, yeah.
He took the dog collar off eventually.
Okay.
He got a little bit older. And we ended up getting married.
Okay. So 20, that's really young.
It was really young.
So did you guys have kids together? Did you start off having kids? Or did you just keep doing the gigs and trying to get the band going? The goal was always music for me. Okay.
But he ended up becoming a helicopter pilot.
Okay. Because
I think he realized, all right, music's fun, but it's probably not going to be a full-time career that's going to pay the bills eventually. Yeah. Which, if there are any musicians out there, like, heaven bless you. It's a fun life for a while. But it's hard. It can be a hard life.
Yeah.
And so for him, he said, I will support you in your music ventures, and I'm going to go and learn how to fly helicopters. And so that's what he did.
Started doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so this is where we kind of get into, turning a tragedy into triumph. And your first husband passed away in an accident, a helicopter crash, correct?
Yes.
Do you mind sharing what happened there?
Yeah. So we had been married for about 2 years, and he had a friend call him. We were actually at a concert one night. It was a Saturday night, and he had a friend who was also his student because he was an instructor. And the student called and said, "Hey, can you take my wife and I down to Georgia? Her grandma is dying. We need to get down there ASAP. We need to get down there right now." And at the time, it was Saturday night. It was almost midnight. And he said, "Can we just wait until tomorrow morning?" And they said, "No, we need to get down there right now." And so he said, "Okay, well, it's not really great weather." I mean, he had a lot of hesitation about going. But I ended up taking him to the hangar. It was 3 a.m. And I took him to the hangar, and, he was just kind of in a bad mood. He didn't want to go. I honestly really had a bad feeling about it.
Right.
And I dropped him off at the hangar, and this weird thought came into my mind that this was the last time I was going to see him.
Really?
Yeah. And it was a situation where I started getting emotional because I thought, why would I think such a horrible thing? What a horrible thing to think that, I thought it came from my own brain. And
right.
And so I get a knock on the door the next morning. It was a Sunday morning. And I get a knock on the door, and it's a female police officer, and she hands me a Post-it note, and she just said, "I need you to call this number. It's a sheriff in Georgia." And so I'm standing there alone, a 22-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And I call this number to this very kind man in Georgia, and he said, "There's been a helicopter accident, and there were no survivors."
Oh, wow.
And so we ended up finding out later that what actually happened was the grandma had already passed away. And my husband's student and his wife were trying to get down to see, there was actually a ring that was an heirloom. And the wife found out that a cousin was going to be driving up from Florida. And she thought, if I could get in a helicopter and get down there, I'll get down there before my cousin gets there to get this ring. And so, he did this favor for these friends under pretenses that were false.
Right.
And it cost all three of them their lives.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you, obviously it's devastating news to hear that. You're newly married.
Right.
It's the love of your life. How did you handle that, and how did you work through that? And
I'd like to say I handled it well. And I think, and the interesting thing is, because people kept looking at me and saying, "Oh, you're so strong, and you're doing such a good job at handling this." What they didn't know was I was drowning my sorrows by drinking, by smoking and doing things that I shouldn't have been doing.
Yeah.
I would go and I would play gigs at bars, and I would go to the bars at like around 9 or 10 at night. I would play for several hours, and then I had a job. So I would get up at 6 a.m. and go to my job. And I just, was burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah.
And on top of that, drinking, but doing it quietly, doing
Behind
it.
the scenes,
yes.
not showing anybody.
No one had any idea
Okay.
what I was, because I thought they're saying I'm so strong. I guess I have to be strong.
I have to show them that I am.
Yeah. And so
Wow.
from the outside looking in, it looked like I was handling it really well. But for about 7 months, I wasn't. I was not handling it well.
Right. And anyone hearing your story right now would understand why you were struggling. Who wouldn't?
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, it's interesting how we try to put on a mask, so to speak. Hey, they say I'm strong. I'm going to show them that I'm strong.
Right.
Right.
Right. And as a 22-year-old, do you think that's what you have to do?
Yeah.
And so I tried that until I just broke. There was just a breaking point for me. And there were some spiritual, what I would call spiritual experiences that I had that caused me to want to change my life around. And I knew that I couldn't do it. We were in South Carolina. We were living in South Carolina at the time.
Gotcha.
And I knew that if I stayed in South Carolina and I continued down this path of just playing in bars and hanging out with the people that I was hanging out with, it just wasn't going to turn out well for me.
Yeah.
So I ended up moving back to Utah.
Okay. Do you mind? I mean, and this may be a kind of a sacred thing to talk about, but you mentioned some spiritual experience. Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, I'll share that. Yeah, if you're okay with
Absolutely.
me sharing
No,
that.
Because my listeners will say, why didn't you ask her this?
Yeah, no,
they would.
Yeah. So the very first thing that happened, which was a really interesting experience, and that was, it was May. I remember the month. It was May. I had someone that I worked with approach me, and he said, "Hey, listen," and this was while I was still married. He said, "This is kind of weird. I know you're only 22, but I just met with a life insurance agent." And he asked if I knew anybody that I could refer. Here's his number. Maybe you should go talk to him. Your husband's a helicopter pilot. And so I talked to my husband. I said, maybe we should just get some life insurance.
Right.
So it was May. We signed up for life insurance. And it was a terrible policy. And I'm an estate planning attorney now. And
that's
so
what you do. Yeah.
it's, I talk to people about this all the time. Everyone get life insurance. But, so this was May. We end up signing up for this terrible policy, but it's life insurance nonetheless.
Yeah.
June 27th is the day that he passed away.
Wow.
So we had life insurance. We paid for 2 months. Of life insurance. And we were so dumb with money. We were young.
Yeah.
We were dumb. When he died, we had $35,000 of just consumer debt.
Right.
Like, I mean, just credit cards and cars and other things.
Sure.
And so for me, it was like, okay, that had to have been divinely inspired somehow. I would have never just done that on my own as a 22-year-old.
Yeah.
And so I kind of went back to that and I kept having this feeling like, you need to go to school. Like, you need to go to college. Like, go ahead and do your music. That's fine. But you need to go to college. And I felt like it was not coming from me. It was inspired. And so one night I just was having... I was having a breakdown. Like, I knew that I wasn't on the path that I wanted to be on. It was about 7 months after my husband had passed away. And I had some extra money after paying off all of our debts. I had to pay for his funeral. I had to pay for his headstone. I mean, that's expensive.
It's very pricey,
for a 22-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
And so I had some money left over, and it became very clear that I needed to go back to school. And it was literally like someone said to me, you have to move back to Utah. You have to go to college. And it came from outside of me because I never would have wanted to move back to Utah.
Right, yeah.
Not in a million years did I ever want to move back to Utah.
Done with Utah.
Right.
Right.
So that's it.
Okay.
It was a sign that
Sure.
there was a higher power looking out for me.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that so much. Well, so you end up moving back and you start going to college, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you sign up for college. Did you know you wanted to go into law?
No, I wanted to be a high school English teacher.
Okay.
And so I went through the whole program and I did my student teaching and I thought, I don't think I like kids. That's not really true.
I know what you mean, though. Like,
yeah,
maybe, yeah.
Well, what I learned was, so at the time, it was a joke, but at the time, I was a paralegal for a law firm.
Okay.
And I was making more money as a paralegal than I would have started at as a teacher, which is such a shame. It makes me so angry.
Yeah.
We have to do better. We have to pay our teachers more. It's terrible.
Yeah.
And I thought, and I spoke with an English teacher who she was almost retired. And she said to me, if you don't love the kids, like if you're not in this because you love the kids, you've got to do something else because you will get burned out. And I think that was her way of telling me she didn't love the kids. But
yeah, right. If you don't love them, trust me. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, but no, she was actually really great. But the reality is I knew that I could make more money as a paralegal than being an English teacher. And I really loved the law. And I had this experience with my husband passing away. And so I became really interested in estate planning.
Estate planning, yeah.
And so that's when I decided I wanted to go to law school, but I ended up getting remarried. When I moved back to Utah, the day that I moved back to Utah, is I ended up hanging out with a boy named McLean, and he was roommates with my best friend who was a male at the time.
Right.
And they were college roommates.
Oh, okay.
And so the day that I got home, I went and hung out with him, and met his roommate, and I actually already knew him. Like I had known him in high school, and we didn't go to high school together, but I knew who he was. And it was very clear to me that this was going to be a long-term thing the day that I moved back to Utah and hung out with him. Wow. And so that's why I knew it was divinely inspired.
Like how's all these things falling into place like that?
The doors just kept opening. And so anyway, I ended up getting married, and I ended up getting pregnant, and my due date was on the same day that I was supposed to take the LSAT.
Oh, wow.
And so I thought, well, okay, I'll just push it off for a couple years. Well, a couple years turned into 7 years. So 7 years later was when I ultimately ended up taking the LSAT.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow. Jeez. And you have two
Two boys now.
2 boys right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, congratulations on that. And wow, that is amazing how everything just kind of fell into place.
Yeah, and I think you have to be really open.
Yeah.
You know, when I had that feeling, you have to move back to Utah, you have to go to college, that was so opposite of what I wanted to do. I think we have to be open to that inspiration.
Yes.
Because I can't even imagine what my life would be like now had I just shut that down.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think, if I'm understanding this correctly, you stopped playing in the bands.
Yeah, so I did. But when I moved back to Utah, I started playing in some other local bands around here.
Okay, I was wondering if you...
So I did. I kept the music thing going, but it was a different route for me. You know, it wasn't like, okay, now I'm going to get, I'm still going to work on getting a record deal. Yeah. I found out that you could make decent money playing in other bands. Yeah. And it was fun, you know, it was still fun.
Still fun for you.
But once I had kids, so I actually played for a local country band, and we would go on a tour bus. And in that band, there's a girl named Lindsay Sterling. She is a violinist, and she's actually a big YouTube star, and she goes and tours now.
I know who you're talking about.
But Lindsay and I were in a band for almost 10 years together.
Really?
Lindsay played for me. If you actually you could go on iTunes and search Ashely Garbe Smith, Good Enough for Now. Lindsay Sterling actually plays on that track.
Okay.
And that was before she became, a famous.
I've actually watched that it was on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that was her.
Yeah. So she was in this country band, and we would go on a tour bus, and I had to take my little 2-year-old on a tour bus, and it was just so hard.
Yeah.
And so I thought, this is just not the life. It's fun, but it didn't align with what I wanted.
Well, and plus bringing a 2-year-old along, that's probably not the best.
No
atmosphere.
No one loved it.
Right.
No one loved it.
Right. Who's this kid on here?
And I would have to bring a nanny who could watch him while I was playing the gigs. And so I ended up really not making very much money at all because all of my money would go to paying my nanny.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's hard for a mom being a professional musician. Yeah. It was just, and I learned that, and I'm so glad I had that experience, but I'm also glad I learned that lesson. So I don't look back and have any regrets, because I tried it, learned that there's a time and a season for everything. Yep. And I had my time and my season.
It. Well, and we talked about that in the beginning. You produced your own album in 2012, right?
Yeah.
So was this during that time frame?
Yeah. So it was during that time frame. And I thought, I'm just going to go all in. Yeah. Write these songs, produce this album, and see where it goes. Yeah. Spoiler alert, it didn't go anywhere. I think my mom bought most of my CDs.
Mom bought 14 of them. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And part of it was because it was right when YouTube was coming out, and I realized in order to really be successful at this, you've got to put a lot of money into these videos.
You do, yeah.
And doing YouTube. And I was a mom, and it was something I wasn't willing. I mean, frankly, I just wasn't willing to put in that much time and effort into it, because at the time, I was 30, and unfortunately, I mean, this is the unfortunate reality of the music industry. When you turn 30, it's almost like an expiration stamp gets stamped on you, and it's a lot harder to make it after you're 30.
Yeah, hard enough anyways.
Right.
But after 30, even more difficult. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. So you go to school, you graduate, and now, let's talk about AGS.
Yeah.
What made you decide to not only go into law, but do your own?
Yeah, that was a scary transition. So when I was in law school, I got offered a job at the firm that I was a paralegal at.
Okay.
So it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like, and because I knew what I was getting into, and I thought I wanted to be a litigator because I'm a performer.
Yeah,
And
right.
so I
yeah.
thought,
Right.
litigation is basically like performing in front of a judge.
So true, though.
But you
Yeah.
learn what litigation actually is you're just playing games with other attorneys.
Yeah.
And most of those attorneys are not pleasant to deal with.
Yeah, I bet that's tough.
And so I was a litigator for several years at this firm, and COVID hit. And COVID hit, and my kids were home, and I had to homeschool my kids. And the firm said, okay, in Utah, what happened is we basically had the 2-week shutdown. And then employers were free to say, okay, employees need to come back.
Yeah.
Or you can work from home.
Yeah.
And frankly, my firm, because it was a little bit older, they just weren't prepared for their employees and their attorneys to work from home.
You're right.
And I had an hour commute.
Oh, wow.
So it was an hour commute. So I had to find a way to homeschool my kids, show up at work every day.
Right.
And,
Jeez.
and I kept getting there. There were a couple partners at the firm who kept mentioning my billable hours, and I wasn't hitting my billable hours. And I would say, yeah, we're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
Like
Pandemic. I've got kids at home.
Yeah.
I'm homeschooling.
And I
all
know
that.
this happened with
Yeah.
a lot of women
Yeah.
and a lot of moms,
Yeah.
where there were expectations placed on them that you just couldn't meet. I mean, I couldn't homeschool my kids and be a good mom and be a good employee and deal with the anxieties of a pandemic.
Right. Yeah.
And I started looking at the numbers, and I thought, okay, I'm pretty good at bringing in clients.
Yeah.
Like, and so at the time, and I haven't done this a lot because I've been running a business, but I was posting social media posts that I was essentially just sharing legal tips.
Right.
And I would get clients, but those clients would be the firm's clients. So I was getting paid a salary,
Gotcha.
but I didn't make any money off the
Yeah.
clients that I brought in.
Yeah.
So I started doing the math, and I thought I could make just as much money
Right.
doing this on my
Doing
own.
it on your own, yeah.
And because the firm I was with was a little bit older, there were a lot of processes and procedures that I looked at, and I thought there's a more efficient way to do this.
Right.
There's a better way to do this. And so I was billing hourly, and I thought, I don't like the hourly billing. I mean, if anyone's ever used an attorney, a lot of times it's, you're paying $350 an hour.
An hour, yeah.
And you don't know how many hours it's going to take.
Yeah.
And I thought there has to be a better way. And so I started running the numbers, and I realized the things that I want to offer, I can offer at a flat fee.
Right.
And I don't have to worry about billable hours. My clients don't have to worry about that. I can use my own technology, and this technology that I've seen that law firms can use that my law firm isn't willing to use.
Yeah.
And if I want, I can work from home.
Yeah.
And at the time my kids were home, they weren't going back to school, and we didn't know what the situation was going to be in the upcoming fall. And so my husband and I had a lot of talks about it, because
Sure.
it's hard leaving a secure
For
job and starting
sure.
your own business,
In a pandemic.
in a pandemic.
Right.
And it was the best decision I could have made for myself and my
Wow.
family.
Wow.
And I'm so grateful. And again, I really do feel like it was divinely inspired.
Right.
And so it was really scary, but honestly, the first year of owning the law firm was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I thought, why doesn't everybody do this?
Right.
Why doesn't every lawyer own their own firm?
Why are they doing this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
So it's been great.
Well, I'm glad you kind of found that sweet spot for you. I mean, that sounds like it just lines up exactly with what you need,
Yeah.
with being a mom and all that.
And I realized that being a litigator just was not in alignment with who I was.
Yeah.
And I think that was the other thing is I thought,
Okay.
if I stay with this firm, because I asked them, I said, if I stay here, am I just going to continue to do litigation? Because I really liked the estate planning and business planning.
Right.
Which is a little bit more like you're not in court as much.
Yeah.
And they said, we're a litigation firm. If you're here, you're a litigator. And it just didn't align with
yeah.
who I was.
Gotcha. Wow. That's thank you for sharing that. Very well said. One of the things we talked about, you're passionate about empowering women. You're a very powerful woman. What does that look like for you, and how do you do that, or what are you doing to kind of help out in that area with other women?
Well, I see, I have been on both ends of the spectrum to where it's like I had no desire to have a career. You know, I was going to be a rock star.
Right, yeah.
You know, or I was going to be a mom. And while I was a stay-at-home mom for almost 8 years. And for me, I always felt this pull to just do something, not necessarily something more, because being a mom is a hard job.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it just really was. But I felt like what I like to call embrace your and. I felt like I could be a mom and an attorney, or a mom and, you know, at the time, I also got my personal training certificate. And I was like, I can be a mom and a personal trainer, and a mom and a musician.
Yeah,
and
I love that.
And I feel like sometimes as moms, we forget that we can embrace that and that if we have the desire to do something, I feel like that desire comes from somewhere.
Yeah.
And you have to listen to that, and you have to follow that. And I think as doors just continue to open, I never thought I could go to law school and be a lawyer. Like I'm just this girl from Salem, Utah. That I wasn't one of these girls that was like, I'm going to be a lawyer from the time I was 10. That just wasn't the case. And so I think if you start having those desires as a mom or a woman, those come from somewhere, and you have to start following those and as the doors just keep opening, walk through them. If a door closes, then it wasn't meant for you.
Yeah.
But at least you've done it, and you know that.
At least you walk through it,
right.
like you said.
Yeah.
You did it. No, I love that. And I think, and not only just even for women, for all of us, we need to be more, like you said, we need to be listening and paying attention to some of these cues that are happening in our lives, right?
Right.
Because I think there's a lot of opportunities that somehow we either miss, or we weren't listening, or, you know, whatever, or later we go, I should have done what that prompting was, or whatever.
Yeah.
So I love that you say that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, I think it's hard. I think sometimes as moms, we have so much mom guilt and shame. And as I was going to law school, I had a lot of people say a lot of hurtful things to me. You know, I feel so sorry for your kids. They're going to be raised by a nanny. And these are people who I was really close to, family members even.
Wow. Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I literally had a family member say, I just am really sad for your kids.
Oh, man.
And I will tell you what, my kids have been my biggest cheerleaders, and both of them want to be lawyers.
Oh, I love it.
And I love it so much.
Yeah.
They saw me go through law school, and they saw that it was hard, but they have also seen the other end. They've seen what happens after. And, you know, we're able to go on vacations as families. And I'm able to, I work mostly from home. I do have an office that I go into, but I'm mostly home.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so I've just been able to find, now I don't believe in balance. You know, I think balance is a myth, but I've been able to find a good path that works. I know it really, when people say I found a good balance, no, I stay up until 2 a.m. a lot of nights.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think what you say about your kids too, they learn by watching you. Yeah. And that is a powerful way to learn. And I think back when you were growing up with your own mom. Right. How hard she was working, that she would go out of the box and like walk up to companies, you owe us money. And watching her do that as a her young daughter, you learned what hard work looks like. You learned what a confident woman looks like. That's kind of how I'm connecting the dots here.
Yeah. And a good mom. She was always present. And so I looked at that. I think what happens is sometimes depending on what culture we live in, I think sometimes we're taught, oh, you can't be a good mom and be a career woman. Yeah. And my mom taught me that just wasn't true. My mom was very present. Wow. And so it taught me that I could do the same.
Yeah, you can do both. You can be this and also a great mom at the same time.
And sometimes I'm not a great mom. Sometimes I'm just an okay mom. Yeah. And that's okay. Like, I don't think we need to feel guilt and shame around that.
Yeah. And I think even moms who are full-time moms would say the same thing. Sometimes I'm good. Sometimes I'm not.
Sometimes I'm completely checked out because I swear I'm going to like lose my mind.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you pointed that out. I think that's fascinating. And congratulations on having your own law firm. And it's called AGS Law.
AGS
correct?
Law. Mm-hmm.
AGS Law. Obviously, Ashely Garbe Smith.
Yes.
Yeah. I love it. You know, if there's someone listening to you right now who is struggling, or they are maybe in a place where they're not sure if they should maybe take on a career. I know you've already given us some great advice, but if there's one person listening to you right now who is in that place where they need help, what would you tell them right now?
A couple things. I think assess your support system.
Okay.
I think that's a big thing.
Love that.
And I'm really, really grateful I had a husband who was so supportive, because making that change for you and your family is not easy, and you need to make sure that it's going to work for your family.
Right.
And so I think having a lot of conversations with your support system and making sure that if you take that leap, you are going to have support. And, whether that's family or friends or a mentor or someone who's who has done it before, I think if you can find a mentor, I love when people reach out to me. I love when moms reach out to me and they say, I'm thinking of going to law school. And frankly, I've talked some people out of it, and I've talked some people into it.
Yeah, based on whatever.
Yeah. And so if you can find someone who has taken that path and say, hey, I would love to take you to lunch. Let's and you can pick their brain. I'm always willing. Hey, I love free lunch. Yeah. So
exactly.
I'll go to lunch with you if you're gonna pay for it. And so I reach out, look at your support system, and reach out to mentors.
Okay.
And then I think just if you have that burning in your heart, if there is something that like that desire and that flame of and desire of going to law school did not go away for 10 years. I was a stay-at-home mom for 8 years, and it didn't go away. I thought there's a reason that this hasn't gone away.
For sure.
And I think you have to really listen to your intuition, and whether it's you think it's the universe or the spirit or God or whoever or whatever it is, be open to that. And if there's a desire there, it's probably there for a reason.
Wow, I love it. As I'm listening to your story from beginning to this point, and I know there's a lot of your story that we haven't touched on, but I can't help but think life happens for us.
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because even unfortunately, and I feel bad that you had lost your first husband, and I feel bad how it happened, but yet it opened up these doors like you've already talked about. But it's interesting, as hard as that was for you as a 22-year-old, look what it opened up to what you're doing now even.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's caused me to have so much compassion, so much more compassion, for people and the trials that they go through. Because, when my husband died and I was 22, I was a 22-year-old widow. I started dating about 8 or 9 months after he died. And people said some really hurtful things. Yeah. And so whenever I see someone going through tragedy or a loss, I have so much compassion, because we don't know how we're going to act or the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And
I
lost friends. I damaged relationships with family members. And because I just didn't do things the quote unquote right way. Yeah. And so it's going through those trials allows us to serve others and have so much more compassion for others who go through that. Wow.
Again, very well said. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to share something, and I think I got this. It's a testimonial about what you do. Do you care if I share it?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's from the owner and co-creator of High Fitness.
Yeah, Emily.
Yes. Okay. She says, hiring Ashely as our company lawyer was the best decision we could ever have made. Not only is she so smart and knowledgeable, but she cares, like you're talking about compassion, cares about your business and helping you succeed. She takes the time to get to know you and your business, which to have a lawyer is to do that is everything. If your lawyer doesn't understand your product, your company, and your mission, they can't give you the best legal advice. Ashely gives me confidence that we are making the right decisions following the law, and does it all in a timely and professional manner. High Fitness is lucky to have such an amazing representation.
Oh, Emily Nelson.
Isn't that cool?
She's just the greatest.
Yeah, it's cool. And I just wanted to share that. And there's many more testimonials that they have about you, but I came across that. I thought, wow, that is powerful. And it says a lot about you.
Oh, thank you.
It just does. And I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us today to share your story. It's you truly have turned tragedy into triumph. Even all the way back to when your parents divorced and watching your mom being a single mom, and glad to hear that you and your dad are now doing great. That's awesome. So shout out to your parents, and just seeing what you went through and how you've persevered and turned it into a triumph. It's pretty cool.
Well, thanks for letting me share my story. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So if someone wants to reach out to you, they want to use your services, they
Mm-hmm.
want to check out your law firm and all that stuff, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way, I mean, if you want to use my legal services, you can go to agslawfirm.com,
Okay.
and there's a contact form there. People reach out to me through my DMs through Instagram and Facebook. If you just search Ashely Garbe Smith, and Garbe is Garbe,
Yes.
then they can reach out to me that way as well.
Best way to do it. Okay, great. Well, thank you for
Thank
taking the
you.
time to do this. This is so awesome, and I'm grateful that we've connected. We've got some mutual friends, which is
Mhm.
cool. And I'm just very honored to be sitting here face to face, listening to your story. And again, like I said earlier, I love the way you carry yourself. It inspires me to want to be better and be more confident in what I'm doing.
Well, you do the same for us and for me and for all of your listeners, so I appreciate what you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, there you go, folks. I told you that today was going to be great, and Ashley's amazing. Please reach out to her. Check out her website. Check her out on Instagram. Ask her a question. She talked about she loves a free lunch. If you got some things where you want to be mentored or you've got need some advice, please reach out to her. And you can also reach out to me, and I can pass it along to her as well. But thank you once again for tuning in. Thank you to the sponsors. I love you guys. If you have someone that needs to be uplifted and inspired, share this episode with them. If they're looking to try to break out into their own career, share this episode with them. And I think that's one of the best ways we get the word out. And Ashley's got a great story. So thank you for tuning in. And once again, Ashely, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.